after doing a video on the history of belly dancing and its relationship to Islam and the West, and how it had specifically to do with male sexual slavery that had a particular fondness among the Ottoman Turks, that to this day, I believe it's Bakibazi is the way it's pronounced, is a practice in Near Asia, such that it was so horrifying to various American soldiers that when they tried to deal with it, because of course this is a part of the economy, that the military actually cracked down on the soldiers for trying to stop the routine sexual slavery of young boys. The Janissaries. Somebody on a site, Mubu, Muzbu, Muzu, something like that, he was writing some stupid shit about how white Muslims are this problem. Of course, white Muslims are what changed Malcolm X from a insane kind of lunatic, pseudo-Islamic racist into an actual practicing Sunni Muslim, which I could give him at least respect in that sense. He met real Muslims when he went to the Hajj, and there was quite a number from Albania and Bosnia and such like. And so he realized, and then the Mediterranean, because of course the Mediterranean is the Mediterranean. Those people are tan, but like Muhammad, and especially Muhammad's 34th generation grandson, or whatever, great-grandson, super-great-grandson, the descendant of Muhammad, 34th generation, he has red hair. He's lily white, just as it says in the hadiths and all descriptions of Muhammad, that he was so white. And there's long descriptions of exactly how white his skin was, and clarifications that they're not using an allegory. Clarifications on that. They actually want to make sure you understand. I'm not kidding. I'm not saying this is an allegory. He was so white. I always like when people try to act like the hadiths don't mean something. The seerah doesn't mean something. Well, it doesn't say that in the Quran. I have a friend who's a Muslim and they told me so. The Janissaries, Ottoman Turkish, Yeniçeri, maybe, Yeniçeri, meaning new soldier, were elite infantry units that formed the Ottoman Sultan's household troops and bodyguards. The corps was most likely established during the reign of Murad I, 1362 through 89. They began as an elite corps of slaves made up of conscripted young Christian boys and became famed for internal cohesion cemented by strict discipline and order. Unlike typical slaves, they were paid regular salaries, forbidden to marry or engage in trade. Their complete loyalty to the Sultan was expected. By the 17th century, due to a dramatic increase in the size of the Ottoman standing army, the corps' initially strict recruitment policy was relaxed. The civilians bought their way into the corps in order to benefit from the improved socioeconomic status it conferred upon them. Consequently, the corps gradually lost its military character, undergoing a process which has been described as civilianization. There we are. The corps was abolished by Sultan Mahmud II in 1826 in the auspicious incident in which 6,000 or more were executed. The formation of the Janissaries has been dated to the reign of Murad I, 1362 through 1389, the third ruler of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans instituted a tax of 1/5 on all slaves taken in war and it was from this pool of manpower that the sultans first constructed the Janissary Corps as a personal army loyal only to the sultan. From the 1380s to 1648, the Janissaries were gathered through the Devshirme system, which was abolished in 1638. This was the taking and slaving of non-Muslim boys, notably Anatolian and Balkan Christians. Jews were never subject to devshirme, nor were children from the Turkic families. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, quote, in early days all Christians were enrolled indiscriminately. Later, those from Albania, Bosnia, and Bulgaria were preferred. The Janissaries were capiculari, single, and in the singular, capiculu, door servants, or slaves of the port. Neither free men nor ordinary slaves, kule. Interesting, kule. Like coolie. Yeah, interesting. They were subject to strict discipline, but were paid salaries and pensions upon retirement and formed their own distinctive social class. As such, they became one of the ruling classes of the Ottoman Empire, rivaling the Turkish aristocracy. The brightest of the Janissaries were sent to the palace institution, Enderun. Through a system of meritocracy, the Janissaries held enormous power, stopping all efforts at reform of the military. According to military historian Michael Antonucci and economic historians Glenn Hubbard and Tim Kaine, the Turkish administrators would scour their regions, but especially the Balkans, every 5 years for the strongest sons of the Sultan's Christian subjects. These boys, usually between the ages of 6 and 14, were then taken from their parents and given to Turkish families in the provinces to learn Turkish language and customs and the rules of Islam. The recruits were indoctrinated into Islam, forced into circumcision, and supervised 24 hours a day by eunuchs. They were subjected to severe discipline, being prohibited from growing a beard, taking up a skill other than soldiering, and marrying. As a result, the Janissaries were extremely well-disciplined troops and became members of the askeri class, the first-class citizens or military class. Most were non-Muslims, because it was not permissible to enslave a Muslim. The Janissary system was introduced in the 14th century. It was a similar system to the Iranian Safavid, Afsharid, and Qajar era Gulams, who were drawn from converted Circassians, Georgians, and Armenians, in the same way as with the Ottoman Janissaries, who had to replace the unreliable Ghazis. They were initially created as a counterbalance to the tribal ethnic favored interest the Kitsilbash gave, which make a system imbalanced. The Janissary Corps was a trained and loyal group of slaves to the Sultan. In the late 16th century, the Sultan gave in to the pressures of the Corps and permitted Janissary children to become members of the Corps, a practice strictly forbidden for the previous 300 years. They also became rent-seeking and sought protection of their special rights and advantages. According to paintings of the era, they were also permitted to grow beards. Consequently, the formerly strict rules of succession became open to interpretation. When they advanced their own power, the Janissaries also helped to keep the system from changing in other progressive ways, and according to some scholars, the Corps was most responsible for the political stagnation of Istanbul. Greek historian Dimitri Kitsikis, in his book Turk-Yunan İmparatorluğu, Turco-Greek Empire, states that many Christian families were willing to comply with the devshirme because it offered a possibility of social advancement. Conscripts could one day become Janissary colonels, statesmen who might one day return to their home regions as governors, or even grand viziers and beylerbeys, governor generals. And they show the Janissary Aga in the year 1768, dressed quite finely, and I might add. Some of the most famous Janissaries include George Castrioti Skanderbeg, an Albanian. Yeah, that's Castrioti. George Castrioti, who defected and led a 25-year Albanian revolt against the Ottomans. Another was Sokolu Mehmed Pasha, a Serbian who became a Grand Vizier, served 3 sultans, and was the de facto ruler of the Ottoman Empire for more than 14 years. For more, I suggest just looking into Wikipedia, and then from there, looking at varieties of different writings on the Janissaries. But it's one of the more fascinating parts of history that we're not really told about the way that the real relationship that Christians and Muslims had when Muslims dominated the Mediterranean, that you simply always were paying tribute to the Sultan. This was up until obviously the 1600s, when he could just pluck Christians like flowers from people. So, yeah, we just aren't told about this. We're told little about it, but we're not given this context of just exactly how normal that was and why there are so many nations in the Visegrad group and elsewhere in far Europe and near Asia that have long hostilities to Islam, and why the West, having known all this at another time, had a long historic animosity toward Islam that was obviously quite justified. Take care.